G'day folks, just about to start up this lecture. I'm going to start my recording. Be with you in a very short amount of time. Where's my little remote control thing going? G'day folks, welcome to week 6, Comp 17, 20, 67, 20. I hope everyone is having a great Monday so far. I hope the folks in here with me in Australia in lockdown have been surviving. I hope that you are prepared for any and all assessment tasks that are occurring in week 6. I know that week 6 can sometimes be a pretty hectic one. So partly for that reason, and partly because we've been going so fast recently in these lectures, getting through code concepts, the lectures this week are a little bit more cruisy. So not quite as much content, not trying to build things up so much. You've got the information that we wanted you to know to do your second assignment, which will be the basis of all the coding you need to know to do this course for your third assignment and the major project as well. Can I also just at this point say how fun it is to see your little pre-lab tasks going by in the forum. I know that people have been putting a lot of effort into those. They're really designed to be something that gets you thinking but doesn't take too long, so that you're always relating some of your work, some of the things we talk about in lectures, to things that you start doing in your labs. So you've got a little bit of homework just to connect the lectures to the labs. And I think it's, from my perspective, it's working really well. I see these great things going by, funny interaction ideas. Last week there were the fun color palettes that everyone was creating. That was really, really fun. I can see a comment already, a question that I'll discuss in a minute. So this is our code concepts revision lecture. I'll get into that a little bit later, a little bit of admin to do first, and then a little bit of discussion about the course survey that you folks filled in last week. So the admin for today is that the first assignment has been marked. The feedback will be coming back to you soon. I hope that whatever mark you get, you can see a fair relation between the work that you put in and the mark that you got out. And I also hope that whatever mark you get, you read your feedback that you'll receive through GitLab and on Discourse as a message. You read that feedback and you feel that that is something that will help you in developing your response to assignment 2. Don't forget that assignment 2 is due on Monday, next Monday, at 9:00 p.m. I've heard from a few folks who have been in difficult quarantine circumstances that they needed more time, and I've been very happy to award an extension. So if someone has any issues about things that are out of their control, quarantine, health orders, isolation, particularly, I know that's affecting our students in residences on ANU campus at the moment. So where will we see grades, through Wattle or Streams? That's a good question for the frequently asked questions on my course. So I think I just said with my voice, you will be able to see them on GitLab, and you will be able to see them on, oops, I want to see the FAQ. You'll be able to see them on GitLab, and you will get a message on Discourse with your grade. You'll also be able to see them on Streams. Marks. There's something here like, how can I see my marks? GitLab. Where can I find my marks and feedback for the assignment? It's in the FAQ. So if you are confused about that, you will find out. It will be, I think it will be pretty clear to everybody when I release the marks. I'll put a message on the Discourse. You'll know what to do. It's not something that you're going to miss, right? You're not going to miss it. It's going to be very clear. Okay. let's talk about marks when they're released. So they just need a little bit more processing and some final checks before I send those out. And we can discuss that on Thursday. Assignment 2 is what everyone should be working on now, and I really hope that you're enjoying your adventures in interactivity. I had some discussions on the forum on the weekend about what a window is. Well, a window is a window. I don't know, an opening in a building or a vehicle. Sometimes covered with glass, sometimes not. That's a literal window. Some people are suggesting they could be doing metaphorical windows. Well, that would need some justification in your artistic statement if you were going to do that. You know, a window is a window. It's just a normal word. I'm not trying to be tricky about this. Course survey. Thank you so much to the course reps for organizing a course survey. It is something which is pretty interesting to get feedback from you folks during the course. And I try to encourage course reps when they're doing surveys to get some information which we wouldn't normally get from a CELT, for instance, the compulsory surveys that happen at the end of class at courses. So just so we know what people are doing, we had 31 responses, which it was great. Thank you so much to those who did it. I hope that when we do a second survey, we get more than 31, because it would be great to have a more wide view of the course. But I had about 2/3 17-20, 1/3 67-20 students getting results back. Most of the folks doing the survey weren't in Canberra, and I think that's something that we should all keep in mind about this course. There are a lot of folks here who are not students on campus, not in Australia. The majority of the students are enrolled in ANU degrees and studying remotely from wherever they may be around the world. So we've got a very diverse bunch of folks in this course, and it's something to keep in mind with your online interactions, right? Not making assumptions about people, about where they are or what their situation is, because we do have such diversity. People are in all kinds of situations. Some folks are working, some are interns, some people are full-time students sitting here on campus, locked down in their dorm room, and they can't move anywhere. So we have quite a interesting range of experiences. This is an interesting question. I suggested to the course reps that they ask, what do you consider yourself a coder or an artist? And somewhere on that spectrum. So where do you think you are on that spectrum? And that's gotten this interesting result. We certainly have a few people who answered the survey who said that they're 100% coder. They don't think they're an artist at all. But that was only 4 people out of the 30 who did the survey. We also have some folks in the class who say that they're 100% an artist and not a coder at all. So that's 2. So roughly speaking, we kind of have these 2 little slices of people who are at the extremes. Either they're 100% a coder, 100% an artist. And those groups are kind of similarly sized, actually, within the class. Most people think that they're somewhere in between. And I think that this is more telling. There's 6 people out of the 31 who said it was 50-50, 6 who said it was 25% coder, 75% artist, and 13 people who said they were 75% coder and 25% artist. So this suggests to me that we've got, in this course, we have people with all kinds of background experiences. Some people, the majority of people in the course have some experience with coding. They're either 100% or 25%, somewhere between that level of percentage coder. So they've probably done some CS courses before or have some other experience. Most people mostly think of themselves as a coder. So they're coming from computer science backgrounds probably. They're enrolled in one of our computer science degrees and they're taking this course as an elective to explore this 25%, this little part of them which is about being an artist. And I know that sometimes we don't see this that often, because probably when you're in the course you might be in labs with friends who are a little bit like you. You might be partnering up with someone you know from other courses or has a similar experience to you. But we do have this quite broad range of experiences here, right? Different levels of this balance between being a coder and being an artist. And the majority of people in the course consider themselves artistic to some degree. And I think that's really positive and interesting, to me at least. And I hope that you find that interesting too. It is very interesting to know what's going on with your colleagues, particularly when we're online, because we don't get as much information about each other. A few kind of quick questions. These were just numerical questions. I didn't have time to make a plot of the distribution, but I can just tell you the mean. First question was, the web page is useful. Most folks either agreed or strongly agreed with that. Mean was 4.61. 5 is like strongly agree, and 1 was strongly disagree. That suggests most people are finding the website useful. There's no one who answered this question said it was terrible, which was good. Next question, the online mode is easy for students. The mean was 4.06. So more about the agree. There's not like so many folks saying strongly agree. There are some folks saying neutral, giving a 3 out of 5. So, you know, my response to that is that online mode is hard for students as a baseline. It's just hard to do online study. There's many things that make it more difficult. There's a lot more responsibility put on students for self-learning, taking responsibility for getting your assignments and everything on time. We don't have so much casual opportunities to communicate information to you. If you go to a lab in person, you might hear someone across the desk talking about the fact that the assignment is due tomorrow, and if you've forgotten, then you've suddenly reminded. You don't get that kind of very casual, brief interactions that help you know where a course is headed when you're online. So we do a lot of extra work when we're doing an online course, partly through videos like this one, to make sure that information is communicated to you clearly, repeatedly. I know it can sometimes get annoying how much I talk about certain topics, but that's because I want to reach the people who may not notice it otherwise, and they're the person who's very busy with other stuff, who just checks in for 5 minutes of a lecture and just catches that bit of information and gets that assignment in and does well. And I want to make sure I catch that person even when we're online. So online mode is pretty hard, but I'm gratified and thankful that you folks think that it is mainly easy. Tutorial sessions are helpful, mean 3.87, so a bit lower. That was neutral to agree. I think given this spectrum, most people are in this half, right? Half of the surveyed people were either 100% coder or 75% coder and 25% artist. And for these people, the labs, at least until week 6, labs 1 to 5, are going to be pretty easy, right? For these folks down here, overlapping a little bit with 50-50, labs 1 to 5 are going to be pretty tough. So I know there are folks in the class who go to these labs and they're just absolutely exhausted by how much they have to learn to keep up with the lab exercises. And I know that there are folks in the class who go through the lab in, a very short amount of time, and they're sort of drumming their hand on the desk thinking, what's next? When do I get a challenge in this course? But because we have this very broad range of students, the challenges are there in the flexibility of the assignments, particularly in the major project, in developing your own vision. So that's a challenge which tends to be equal for everyone on this spectrum, developing your own vision and executing it. The coding stuff in the first few weeks of the course is disproportionately tough for those who are more artists than coders. But this course, to be honest, is really catered at the first year level. So I know we have a lot of master's students who maybe have done computer science bachelors, and we've got a lot of folks who are upper level computer science students, and they are certainly going to find the first few labs pretty easy because they've already got a background in CS, they've done those labs many times before, or done that kind of work. But I am catering for the level that we've set the learning outcomes, and I think that for everyone in the class, you'll find that as the course goes on, the challenge is there in realizing a major project, not just from the artistic standpoint, but from a code standpoint as well. It's something not everyone has done in their degree. So tutorial sessions are helpful. So far, most people agree. I know there are some people who find them easy, but that's probably because of their background rather than, well, that's what I'm going to say anyway. I work with the tutors a lot to improve the material all the time. So we always have discussions about this, and I hope that you find that, well, it's certainly better than it was last year, but you wouldn't know that because you didn't take it last year. We have improved things every year, and I hope that you find them improve as the course goes on and the tutors gain experience and I gain experience working with them and you. A few things you like from this course, and these are great to hear this. I enjoy being able to express my own creative ideas. Interaction, fantastic. Using your imagination and finding art, so good, thank you. Lecture format and teaching style, well, thank you, that's a compliment to me and I really appreciate it. I enjoy how flexible the assignments are. That's great to hear. I love having courses with flexible assignments. It's so great to see the broad range of responses that students give to me on the same task, right? I think you've probably all seen the name tag gallery. It was a simple task, go make a name tag with P5 and look at the huge range of different interpretations of that and different approaches we've seen. Partner collaboration as well as the lab tasks. People appreciate that, that's fantastic. I find the art-focused lectures to be very engaging and interesting, someone said. This, I think, was coming from a computing student. Well, I appreciate that a lot. As I think I've said, I've got a background in music, not particularly in visual art, and I've done my best, and I'm happy that you've enjoyed them and found them engaging and interesting. I like to show my personality through homework. I really like hearing that because that shows that this course is working for someone who is having a chance to express themselves through computing, which they may not have had before in other courses. Things that are hard. Things that are hard. So this is the maybe not so great. The art part's a bit hard. Well, I think that's probably likely to be the case. Looking again at the distribution of folks in this course, there are many folks who are less experienced with art than they are with computing, and they might find the art part a bit hard. The answer to that is that we provide small assessments and lots of lab tasks and lots of pre-lab tasks that give you practice in engaging with art. And when you practice something, you get better at it. So I don't expect folks who come into this course as an art beginner to be good at art straight away, just as I don't expect folks who come in as a code beginner to be good at code straight away. I do expect everyone in the course to practice and develop their skills. So it's great that I'm hearing that people are finding the course hard because it's good to have a challenging course. We do learn by challenging ourselves. Someone says, my ideas are too hard to achieve in P5. I wish I could fit P5 perfectly. Well, that's a really good point. Sometimes it's hard to pick an idea of the right level of difficulty and find a way to break down your idea into steps that you can achieve. So that's why we have increasingly complex labs. You'll get to do some quite more involved tasks in the coming 3 labs before we really start engaging with the major project. And I think again, this is something that you learn by practice. So we're giving you these assignments which start quite simple and get to a higher level expectation with the major project. Someone says, I think learning the code while others are already ahead, I think I'm learning code while others are already ahead, and I know it puts me at a disadvantage. And that's something which is sometimes hard to hear. It's hard for me to hear that folks are feeling like they're at a disadvantage, because from my perspective, they're not. And if you feel like you're at a disadvantage because you're learning to code for the first time and others are already ahead, then I want you to hear these words. There are folks who have done the course who have been in the same situation as you, and they have achieved a high distinction in this course. There are folks who have never coded a line of JavaScript or P5 who have gotten some of the highest marks and done some of the best major projects. So I know that there's a perception that there's a disadvantage, that you need to be an expert coder to attack all of these lab tasks. And I know that it can be hard to be in that situation because the number of people who are absolute beginners in code is much smaller than the number of people who are beginners in art or have more experience with code. Most people in the course have some experience. But for anyone who is feeling disadvantaged, it's something to talk about with your tutor. Make sure you're making use of the resources I've given you. I've given you tutors to talk to. I've given you a forum to ask questions, and many ways to communicate with us and develop your skills with code, and many assignments to practice doing more and more complicated things. Oh, someone's telling me the live stream is breaking off a lot. I don't know what's going on with the live stream. If the live stream, it seems to be okay on my Restream app. So if you're finding the live stream breaking off on YouTube, try Twitch. If it's breaking up on Twitch, try YouTube. If it's working up on Microsoft Stream, that might be a Microsoft Stream issue. Microsoft Stream is very tricky sometimes. Yeah, sorry for anyone who's having an issue with that. Yep, some people are saying it's fine on Twitch and YouTube, so it might just be a Microsoft Stream issue, which is unfortunate. MS Stream tends to be the least reliable of the streaming services, but it's the only one that I know that our folks in China can access directly and easily, because it's sort of part of the university's services. Okay, art part's a bit hard. I know I've gone on and on about the survey, but it's good to know yourself, and it's a slow week. Some suggestions on what could be improved, and this has come up several times in the comments over the last few weeks, wanting more assignment samples. And I understand that, the want for more assignment samples. I've shown you samples for assignment 1. They were kind of built into the course. I didn't have any ready-made ones for assignment 2 that I was able to show you. I can't just go and take student assignments from previous years that they haven't given me permission to share. I think I'm happy to sort of direct you to look at assignments from within your class, but I can't go back into previous years and just take random bits of code and show them to you. I think that's a little bit unfair. So what I've done is ask the tutors whether they would be okay with sharing some of their assignments, and we'll get back to you. I'll have a chat with them this afternoon about it. I can't just create assignment examples out of nothing, unfortunately. It doesn't quite work like that. But I've seen in the comments some people saying, I want to know what is good work, considered to be good work as an assignment. And I think, well, there's 2 ways of doing that, looking at examples or making something and just asking your tutor, because your tutor will give you very direct feedback about whether they think something's a good idea or not, or posting something on Discourse, right? If you want to get feedback on it, take a screenshot of your assignment and post it on Discourse, and people can, I'll jump in and give my views about it. I've done that a few times with people asking questions. People who would like larger groups instead of pairs, I hear that. That's an interesting perspective. Feeling isolated in labs, that's a really tough one. Those 2 things are related. They're to do with how we've designed our lab tasks. Doing online labs is one of the hardest things to do. It's really hard to do an online lab and build a sense of community. So I'm really concerned about this feeling, that people are feeling isolated. I'm also concerned that the way we approach the group work isn't working for everybody. And I think we might try to introduce some more flexibility in that. You will still have to work as a group or a pair and collaborate, but maybe some different sized groups would be interesting. I know some tutors work with their labs a little bit differently than others, so we'll have a discussion about how that works and see how we go improving it. If you're feeling isolated in labs, that's really tough. Try to get into discussions with your tutor, with your fellow students. The more you share, the more you tend to get back. So if you feel like no one's paying attention to you, take a screenshot of what you're working and put it in the chat, and people will talk to you about it. So that's something that you can do. As we as teachers sometimes find it hard to know when someone's feeling isolated because they're not obvious. We've tried to have some ways to make sure we call on everyone in the call call on everyone and make sure that we see if they're there and poke them and make sure they're working. But if you're feeling isolated at any particular time, your tutor might not be going to call on you for 20 minutes. Just put something in the chat and people will be there to talk about it. A few other questions. Someone suggested that aesthetics is subjective. Well, in some ways, yes, aesthetics is subjective. Like maybe there are certain artworks that I would like in my house and some that I wouldn't, because I want my house to be a certain style. And I have a subjective idea about what I want my background to be for my desktop computer. And other people would have a different view. But quality of an assignment submission tends not to be that subjective in a course when you're dealing with 200 students. It's pretty clear when you look at 10, 20, 50 assignments that some folks are doing something where they've really engaged with the material. They've got a really sophisticated level of work on display, both technically and artistically. They've got a lot of depth, and that they deserve a really high mark for it. And there are some who are not quite there. They've engaged in a way which is less sophisticated. Maybe they're technical. Technically, they haven't done that much, and they're not going to receive a mark which is high, because we're trying to measure all of those levels of sophistication, as I said, in the marking guidelines. But it's not subjective, right? We're measuring the level of sophistication of an engagement. I'm not measuring whether I like the artwork or not, right? I might find something really ugly and give it 95%, and find something really pretty, but there's a lot of sophistication and engagement missing, and give it 60% or 55%, even though it's sort of subjectively nice to look at. So the subjectiveness of aesthetics doesn't come into the marking so much. It's more the sophistication of your process as evidenced through the output. Someone was asking for more instructions and details in the assignments. I feel like we've got quite a long page already. So if I add more instructions and details, it's going to be even longer. Maybe they're asking for a more specific assignment task. And if that's the case, then sorry, our assignments are designed to be open-ended. That's the way this course works. Someone was asking for an organized area of coding topics, which is a fair thing to ask for. I feel like I already talked a lot about this thing called the reference. And there's a great website, p5.js.org/reference. Maybe you've heard of it. And it has a fantastically amazing organized list of code topics. I guess it doesn't have things like a for loop or a while loop or if then else, but it's got all of the aspects of P5. I've also made a suggestion of a textbook you can look at, the textbook for the course. Books and links. I think I talk about this every week. Make Getting Started with P5.js by Lauren McCarthy. That's available through the ANU library. It's free for everyone in this course to look at that. These are things that you can go and look at where you see very organized areas of coding topics. I also have the lecture notes, which are organized areas of coding topics, but I know that doesn't appeal to everyone. So there's a references page, a book, there's a lot of things you can look at. So I hope people are making use of those aspects. Someone says the website's too bright, which is fair enough, it's very white. The website is the official ANU color standard, so that's unfortunately too bad. Even if I wanted to make it dark, I can't. Yeah, someone's mentioned there's an official standard JavaScript reference, the MDN documents. I've talked about that in the lectures a few times, and there are links to that in the lecture slides. You can go and look at those links. The reference there tends to be a bit codey, so if you're not a coder, it can be a little bit hard to understand. The quality is good. Yes, well, someone's suggesting we should comment on the subjectivity of the ANU aesthetic, but that's not above my pay grade. Partners and group work in labs. I'm really happy that so many of you enjoy group work, because people often grumble about group work. Maybe it's because you're not getting group marks, right? The lab work is in groups. I know there are folks who would prefer labs to be individual. They just want to get in, do their tasks, walk away. My answer to those people is I'm very sorry, but that's not the way that this course is designed. We designed this course on purpose to have labs which are collaborative, which involve pairs of people or groups. And the reason for that is twofold. One, when you're learning with other people, you're sharing information, and we call that peer learning, and it's a very effective way for people to learn. It's particularly effective when you're combining folks with different levels. So we've got a range of different levels in this course, and when someone who knows a topic well combines with someone who doesn't know it so well, the information flows down, and then eventually they're kind of on an equal footing, right? Because the person who knows the topic well is being a bit of a teacher. In fact, the person who's learning from another student gains knowledge. The person who's teaching the other student also gains knowledge. Their knowledge increases because they're teaching it. So it's a fantastic circle of positivity when people are teaching each other in labs, and that's what I want to encourage. The second reason is that if we were in an in-person lab environment, I would expect to see conversations going across desks, people sharing their work, people turn around and look at each other's screens. When we're in an online environment, the reality is that doesn't happen unless it's part of the task. So unfortunately, unless I force you by making it a required task, the majority of students will just do their work individually, keep in their little isolated bubble, and then feel sad because they're very isolated in the course. I don't want that. I want the majority of students to have a positive, collaborative, peer learning environment. If you hate it, well, I'm not making you go to labs. They're required. We have marks assigned to completing the lab tasks, but I'm not putting handcuffs on you. It's just something that people do because they really want to learn and want to contribute and want to develop their skills. And I think that most folks are getting something out of it. So I think that the fact that we get high ratings for the as high as 3.87 out of 5 for the mean rating for the labs suggests that most students are having a good time in the labs. Okay, so just referring to these questions, but just in general, if you have any dissatisfactions about the course, well, I just want to outline what we do in general. We prepare labs to offer you a lot of practice and assignments, so you get to improve your skills. We're answering every question in the forum. If you ask a question in the general forum, it will get answered by either myself, a tutor, or another student. So if you feel isolated, you feel you don't know enough about something, ask a question in the forum. You can go in anonymous mode if you want to. Click the little anonymous guy in the discourse forum menu and ask how does a for loop work, and people will be there to answer it. The course is designed to keep you accountable for regular engagement and collaboration. So that's why we have these lab tasks that specifically say you need to work in pairs or as a group, and that's why we assign marks to those, because we know that you will be learning about these learning outcomes by doing it in a group. What you can do, this is what we do, what I promise to do, and this is what you can do. You can ask questions. You can, if you're working on building your code skills, and even if you're not, when you're doing your pre-labs, make your response in P5, take a screenshot and post it. The best pre-labs I've seen are the ones where someone's just started to nut something out in P5. They're using P5 as a sketch pad for discovering ideas, like I do in the lectures, right? Using P5 as a sketch pad to figure something out. So do that, right? That's part of your practice. That'll help you do much better assignments if you're practicing with P5 weekly as part of your pre-lab work. Participate in labs as much as possible and really focus on that collaboration and peer learning. So I've told you now that that's not by accident. We ask you to do that on purpose because we know how valuable it is. The more that you engage with the peer learning, I think the more you'll get out of the labs. Share your work. And for everyone who's sitting there asking me to show examples, you can certainly be the first mover. Share your own work so far. Ask questions about it. talk to other folks about it. This is an open course. There's very little risk of people stealing ideas. It's just not how things work in these assignments. People take inspiration from others, they take inspiration from other sources, but when we look at the assignment outcomes, the variation is so broad in them that your ideas don't need to be held under lock and key. You can share them and get more back than you are giving when you do that. For you, if you're having trouble or you feel there are weaknesses in what you know, take ownership over your learning. I've given you lots of links to videos and books. There's 2 links here, particularly the link to the Coding Train series on YouTube and the textbook. There's lots of ways to learn this material and engage with it. And if you're really having trouble, ask for help. We've got a whole page to do with getting help. Getting help. All these ways to get help. Go and get some help. We're here for you. That's what we're doing. We help people every day. It could be you. Okay, here's the code theory recap. Whew, that was a long chat. I'm just going to sip my water for a minute. We'll go to my little break. 40 minutes. I've just talked about the course survey, eh? What a lecture. Alrighty, and we're back. Code theory recap. This is another well-organized series of slides about the different code fundamentals we've been through in this course. We'll have, I guess, some art theory recap in the next lecture, but for now, let's get through these different topics. This was the first week. Do you remember this one? Painting like a 5-year-old. What's this kid got? Some irresponsible person has given this kid a can of spray paint. Boy, I would not give a kid a can of spray paint if you want to not have to get spray paint out of their hair and clothes. That seems like a really dangerous thing to do. Why did we talk about painting like a 5-year-old? We were talking about how we make computers do things. When we were talking about how we have to be really specific when we're giving a computer instructions. And in particular, I want to now say, from the other end of this 6 weeks, that learning to give particular instructions is a skill. It's not just a thing that you decide to do. Breaking down tasks into many small instructions. And that's why I think someone said, oh, I've got great ideas, but I can't make them in P5. Well, that's because you're still building your skill with taking an artistic idea and breaking it into the small instructions. Sometimes people call that computational thinking. I get that term's a little bit discredited, but it's a skill that we teach in all computer science classes, how to break down complicated tasks into smaller ones that a computer can accomplish. We had our list of first words for this, our little P5 baby. Background, rect, ellipse, fill, stroke, random. Oh, I remember those heady days of lecture 1 when I was just making Mondrians appear on the screen. We only needed these 6 things. And in fact, I've seen a lot of really, really creative assignment 1 submissions that really only used these 6 things. And, you know, it's a bit wild, but I see those submissions with a little bit of interactivity, some more imagination and development. They could even be great major projects, which is sometimes a funny thing to think about, but you can do a lot with a little when you're thinking creatively and using a lot of imagination. And you have a deeply considered artistic process. First words, doing a lot with a little. Background, rect, ellipse, fill, stroke, random. We discussed the reference, that well-organized place to find out about coding things. Now that was pretty cool. That was my catchphrase. We remember that you have to be very specific. Computers can't deal with vagueness. They don't figure out what you mean if you don't say it clearly. So that was something we had to work through when positioning those squares and circles on the canvas. We talked to P5 about colors, learning about how fill works, how to divide things into the primary additive colors, red, green, and blue. Talked about positions on the screen. And we talked about the grid. So the whole canvas area is that grid of numbers that sort of represent pixels on your screen. Sometimes that's a little bit of a fuzzy connection, but you can use these numbers to position items, and we had to remember that Y was coming down the screen, not going up the screen. So it starts at 0, 0 in this corner. Across means X getting bigger, and down means Y getting bigger. We learned about how the computer reads and in what order these instructions are going to be issued and completed. So we know that the higher up on the screen you see an instruction, that one happens first. And it's really important when you're painting with P5, because if you paint one color over something you've done before, what you've done before disappears. So you can get mixed up in your order of operations being executed, and suddenly find that part of your artwork has disappeared or never shows up, or it doesn't fade away properly. Often that happens when the order of things is confused. It doesn't tend to happen too much when you've only got 4 lines of code, right? Because most of us can generally see a background first, then an ellipse on top of that, then an ellipse on top of that. But when you've got other functions you're calling, like draw stuff, do some other things, we can get confused about what was really in this draw stuff. The thing which can really confuse us, I guess I would say, is that the painter's algorithm, there might be something in a function that you've called that leaves behind some information about the way that your world is. And what tends to get left behind is stuff about fill and stroke, right? Because fill, once you've set the fill color, it's set for all subsequent drawing instructions. So if I set the fill color 0, 1, 2, 7, 2, 5, 5 in this function, that will be the same fill color when I draw this circle. And sometimes we forget about that, or we call this draw stuff in a loop and we forget that it's happening, or how many times it's happened. So it's good to remember, if anything's going wrong, go through your flow, make sure you know what's happening in your code, which bits are happening one after another, because that can cause some issues. Yeah, someone says it's very annoying to work with when that happens. I agree. Whenever I work in P5 or processing or open frameworks, I've always been like, remember to just have the fill and stroke just before your drawing command, because if you just draw an ellipse and you haven't had a fill or stroke recently, you might have forgotten what they were going to be. The flow of your code. I think you now have this idea internalized. The setup function runs once, then there's draw, 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 draw. And we also had the preload function. We'll just look for that in the reference, because that's important. Preload. That's a function which loads even before setup. So particularly if you're loading images or other assets, you often want to put them in preload so that they're loaded in your canvas. Then you can use them within setup. And then use draw. Draw, 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 draw happens over and over again. Jean's suggested we should, to help solve our problem with colors and objects being, and things being drawn in the wrong order, we could have a more complicated arrangement, objects and then a depth of each shape. Look, there might even be something behind the scenes with that kind of stuff in P5, graphics, contexts and order of operations, but we tend not to see it. We just have to work in this slightly simplistic world, but it mostly works until it doesn't, in which case we just have to go through our code carefully and be very precise about what's going on. So that was the preload function, an extra one. Even before setup, you can preload. Setup, draw, 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 draw. In P5, the order matters. We've been through that. You can easily paint over something if you get the order wrong. So at this point, you have all the tools you need to draw anything. You can draw any picture you want in P5 with what we presented to you just in the first 2 weeks of the course. And you could see that in the assignments, how much people were able to do with just those tools. So everything else, all the other stuff I've talked about, is for making your programs more structured. What do I mean by structured? You're arranging your code in ways that it's shorter, it saves you typing, it's easy to understand, you can make it interactive and dynamic, you can scale your code so rather than drawing 6 dots, you draw 6,000 dots by just changing one line of code. That this is the advantages that structured programs give you. So that's the structure is the conditionals, the iterations, and the objects and the functions. Those are all the different programming structures that we start to discuss. And that's when programming really gives you superpowers as an artist, when you can structure your programs and change a small amount of code and give you a big change in the artistic output. Someone says, is it possible to make a new canvas in Canvas? I think so. That's a bit of a deep P5 question. Is it? Surely it's in the reference. Canvas. Yep, create canvas. Maybe. Save canvas, no canvas. I suppose if you do that more than once, it would be bad. But if you want more than one drawing canvas, you can use create graphics. There you go. Hidden by default, and then you can make more create graphics. So let's have a look at create graphics. I think we maybe discussed this in a later lab a little bit. So your canvas is your area that you're drawing in within P5, and you can actually take that canvas, put it somewhere else, and have another one, and then get the first one back. It's a little bit of a runaround in the code to make that happen, but you can see here the author has created a new canvas, called it PG, just a var name to give it. Then they've done some work on that canvas, so they're using it like an object, giving it background, doing no stroke, drawing an ellipse, all on the PG canvas. And then after they've done some drawing, they paste their canvas onto the main canvas that's visible at all times. So yeah, so it's possible to do this and useful for some more advanced ideas about how to do drawing in P5, but we don't talk about it too much in the course. Variables. So this was how we saved numbers and things with certain names so we could get them back later. You could have a variable which would store a number. It can store a number which has been adjusted, like width divided by 2. You can store random numbers in variables, and this was when things started to get interesting with our programs in terms of changing one line and having lots of effects later in the program. Because if you use variables to store important numbers in your program, like the number of circles to draw or how far apart each block should be in your drawing, then you can then change that value in one place, and all the way through your sketch it will be updated automatically. So to use variables, you have to do 3 things: declare them, let age, initialize them, and then use them in your code. And we did have a little bit of a discussion about these 2 little things, let and var. They're both words that you can use for declare, and they're almost the same. The modern one is let, so I always use let in my lectures, mostly. It should be mostly let in the labs as well. I'm still catching a few vars. I'm updating all the vars to lets these days, but if you look at an older book or an older example in P5, you might see some vars instead, but they basically mean the same thing, almost. There's special variables as well, like mouse X, mouse Y, location of the mouse on the screen. Mouse is pressed. That's a Boolean value, which is like if the button is down, that will be true. Width and height. They're declared and initialized by P5, but they're for you to use, so you can make your sketch react to what's happening within the computer. So what can we do now? We started using simple maths to set out sketches, and we started to make our sketches interactive, which was pretty fun, wasn't it? Building up our sketches to interact to what was happening with the mouse and build things, loop over certain things or change variables to move them to different places in the screen. And that was where it got pretty cool. We talked a lot about truth, doing a little bit of maths to do with truth values, the Boolean type, true and false, and these truth operators. So you can combine two Booleans, something and something else, something or something else, and just not something, the opposite value. And then we had our standard mathematical items for dealing with numbers or other kinds of types. So less than or equal to, greater than. All of these operations would give you, take in two numbers and give you out a Boolean value. And they were useful for conditionals and loops. And we use the conditionals for choosing which route in our code we would take. I think someone was asking me, it was either a lecture or in the forum, like, can I have no loop work only sometimes? And my suggestion was, you don't want to do that. Once you hit no loop, your loop will stop, your draw loop. What you should do is within your draw code have multiple chunks of code, and they're all under certain circumstances, then some of them will run and others won't. And then you'll use conditionals to choose that circumstance or figure it out. If something, 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 do this bit of code. If something else, do another bit of code. Else, do both, right? You can have all of those options. So within your draw loop, you might have multiple blocks where you're using if and else to choose which bits of your drawing to create. Syntax recap, conditionals. So there was let the sky is blue equal false. If the sky is blue, we draw an ellipse. Else, we draw a rectangle. So that's a very simple one because it's simple because the sky is blue has just been set to false. That means we always go to rect. If this was in your draw loop, you would always draw a rectangle. Here's a more complex one. If frame count greater than 60, text you lose. Else, text, wow, you're so good at this. I wonder what this one really does. Let's just give it a go. Probably have to load a font or something. Oops, I only got one. Where's my... How do I do text again? Folks, feel free to correct me. No. I should put 0, 0 or something. I'll just put it in a little bit. Whoop, you lose. Move the text across. So this is not a very good game, is it? Because there's no way to win. After 60 frames, you lose the game, no matter what you do. But we've used the frame count to give us a circumstance under which different bits of code are drawn. So here's the first bit of code is draw this bit of text. Here's the second bit of code. So this is what I mean. Within your draw loop, different things can happen under different circumstances. And this one's using frame count to really just count time in your sketch. Counting time going forward. Loops. We talked about the while loop. So the while loop checks a condition, and if that condition is true, it runs the code within its little curly braces. And the for loop checks doesn't just check a condition, it sets up a lot of extra variables to count different values, and then it loops over them as well. So the for loop is, we've got two loops written here, and they're both kind of doing the same thing, because the while loop is setting up a counter value, I, and then doing some checking, I less than 10, and then at the end of the loop code, it's adding one to the counter. And the for loop sort of lets you put all of this stuff in the one line, just to make sure that we've got things organized. Of course, we had that other kind of loop, a different type of for loop, which is really the more modern one for, I'm running over my head here, I'll write it over this area, for let a of, something. stuff. So if we had if we had an array, let stuff equal array of a bunch of stuff, a bunch of things that we can call A. This loop will take out every little thing of that array, and then we can do something with it. It'll be called A, let A of stuff, and it'll go through all of the items in the array, and then that will be the end of the loop. So that's a really handy way to be looping. We call it looping over the items in a collection or an array. And it's a very handy little technique, which isn't in the notes. I should put them in the lectures for next year. But I've talked to you verbatim about it. So what can we do once we've got these loops and conditionals? You can make dynamic sketches that change over time. You can make decisions, and you can repeat things to save yourself typing and save your tutors having to read it all, which is very handy. Functions. This was getting a little bit higher level concept. So we know how to use functions because we've been using our basic instructions like rectangle, 100, 100, 100, 100. We know that each command has a name, and then it has a list of parameters. And the parameters then end up get used in whatever code it is that generates the rectangle. So we learned how to write our own functions. Polka dot, X and Y, was going to draw a little dot on the screen. Let's draw some polka dots. Putting another function down here. I might add a comment just to decorate my function. Draw a polka dot. We don't really need to because the polka dot is so it's such clear code and it's got such a good name. So when the frame count is less than 60, we're going to draw some polka dots, or just one. Polka dot, random width, random heights. Oops, what have I done here? I've got an incorrect spelling of random. Luckily my computer didn't catch on fire. There's my, wow, very... And I've got something that's changed in my sketch. I've been caught by my own warning. I've got red text, but I really wanted black text. Why would it have red text? Because as soon as I run the polka dot function, I've called fill25500, made my text red, and then it starts writing text with the same fill color. So I'm going to have to fix that, 0, 0, 0, or just 0 to make it black. And then fill 0. And I really don't want a stroke. No stroke. I do want a stroke when I draw my text. I don't know why. I don't think the text uses a stroke. Or maybe it only uses a stroke. I don't know. Oh, no, I don't want a stroke. Does that make it good? I don't know what I want. I'm confused and don't know what I want. Okay, now I've got my text looking the way I want it and my red strokeless polka dots. Ooh, I might make it use a while loop here. Oh no, that's the wrong kind of loop. I want a for loop. For let I equals 0, I less than 13. I'm going to draw 13 polka dots with each frame. And I equals I plus 1. I got a lot more polka dots now. Polka dots. This is the worst artwork ever. Sorry folks, I've gotten really bad this week at doing artworks. I've lost my creative skills. So this is how you write functions, and I think you'll get a lot of practice about these, particularly this week. And in the next few labs, we do ask you to use these more complicated features. There was the function that returns values, which we tend not to use that much. I just might use it for something, hey? Why not? Whoops. Function, return, I don't know, what should I return? Polka dot size or something. I want them to be, this is strictly increasing size polka dots. Let last polka dot size equals 20. This is really weird now. I don't know where I'm going with this. As I told you, it was difficult to find ways to use functions that return a value. Return last polka dot size. So I've got a global parameter there, let last polka dot size equals 20, a global variable, and that's going to be polka dot size so new polka dot new size equal last polka dot size plus random 20, random between 1 and 20, not 0 and 20. I've got to have a let there, and I'm going to have to use it here. New polka dot. Why did I have this code with polka dot size in it? It's such a hard thing to spell. Get rid of that 20. So my polka dots should increase in size because I've got this function which is going to return a bigger number each time for some reason. Let's see if it works. It just went all red. That's not what I wanted. Start at 0. And they get really huge. They get too big too quickly. Maybe random, just random 1, 0, 1. I want to slow down their bigness. Yeah, now they get big. And then when you've got the screen full of polka dots, you lose. Great artwork, Charles. I can see everyone cheering from the team. All right, good functions. Arrays, we already talked a little bit of arrays today. We had arrays of numbers. You could put anything in an array. Numbers, strings, booleans, a mix of different things. You can make empty arrays. You can have arrays in arrays. We did talk about the fact that arrays were kind of objects, but they're got this nice syntax for just declaring them quickly and adding things to them and removing them. So have a look at the MDN reference for arrays. That was the website we were talking about earlier, actually, for code ideas. If you need to get deep into something to do with JavaScript, have a look at the entry on MDN, web docs. Arrays. We had these ideas of pushing things to the end and to the start, unshifting things on the start, and popping or shifting things off the ends. And then there's that way of finding out the length of an array, array.length. So I heard you like arrays, so I put an array in your array. Arrays in arrays is handy sometimes, particularly if you want to represent 2D values. You might have an array of arrays where each of the sub-arrays has an X and a Y value. So you can just store locations on the screen. Here's an example, looping over an array. Let points equals these, arrays of arrays, and then a for loop over all those points, checking one each time. 4 points I0, 4 points I1, getting the X and Y locations out of each of those points. And you can see we've used points.length in this one. It's really handy to use the .length property of an array so that you can loop over each item. Of course, we could also do our for of loop. Whoops, I've gone. Get rid of that. Let p. Get rid of all this. Let p of points. And then we just have to say p0 as our for of loop. Objects. This was the most complicated thing we got to. A bunch of properties, each of which has a name and a value. And it was also a useful way of grouping related bits of data together. Here was our example. Let Sally equal a Pikachu. It was all of the descriptions of Sally the Pokemon. What species is Sally? What level is Sally? What HP is Sally? Who's Sally's owner? And is Sally captured? So some simple syntax, a way of combining multiple bits of information. And the good thing about making objects is that you've got little descriptions of each bit of information. You could also do this with an array, but you'd have to remember, well, I've always got item 5 in my array is the owner. So if I ever need the owner, I have to get item 5 out. Well, you can do that, but it's more convenient just to type sally.owner rather than Sally in brackets 5, write a comment next to it, this gets the owner. So objects are really useful. I do encourage everyone to give it a try. Setting property values using the dot notation, which was, I think, pretty useful and nice and elegant. And then the in brackets notation, which is the same as using arrays. So they're the same, they get you the same thing. Arrays are objects. You use objects when you've got related values with different types, and typically an array when you've got a lot of values of the same type. So they don't need to have names, they can just have a number. A number will do. Don't be afraid to have an array of objects or an object of arrays. We can have both. We can have all the things in our code. And it makes our code better and our lives easier and more happy to have all of these things working together. And we did discuss the fact that P5 is making lots of objects under the bonnet. In the inside, under the covers of P5, there's lots of objects going on. So let's just do one in setup. I'll make a color, let magenta equal that, and then print magenta. And there's my printout of what magenta's value is, and you can see it's listed in this object notation, JavaScript object notation. There's its arrays, different arrays for each of the types of values. These are the maxes for each of the settings, each of the color modes, sorry. So this one's mode of this color is RGB. The max is 255. And then the actual values are as written here. Levels 220, 0, 220, 255. And that was sort of, this is the percentage, 86% for red, 86% for blue, 0% for green. Yeah, so Gene's got an interesting comment about arrays and calling random properties. There's something which gets me later in this course where I did objects wrong, and it broke some code in a lecture and it was embarrassing, to do with a game of life. And I had to have the students help me to figure out what I'd done wrong. It was about like initializing empty arrays with a certain number of values or something. It was a tricky point of JavaScript that I need to get right. And the problem is I worked out I was wrong on the day, fixed it, but I've forgotten what it was. So we'll get to it again this year, in about week 10 or 11 or something. My big mistake with arrays that broke my code. And here was a little example of using conditionals and functions together. What do you think the bubble object might look like? Function, draw a bubble. If bubble.popped, fill 100, else fill 20, 50, 250, 150. So it's going to have a different color for this bubble. So no matter what, we're always getting an ellipse that's 50 wide and 50 high. We don't know where its location is because that's related to the input bubble. And we know that it's got two options for color. One is this kind of blue color, and the other is a gray color if it's been popped. So that's the complete description of bubble. We don't know much else about bubble, but the object itself, you might draw it, you might write it out like let bubble equal curly brackets popped false x 100 y 250. So that might be our bubble. Sorry, it was black text on a grey background. It was a bit hard to read, but you get the idea. That might be one way of drawing a bubble. We could add more stuff to bubbles if we wanted to, but that would be sufficient to run this code. Looping over everything in an object, looping over all of the arrays. Loop over all the bubbles, yeah. So we've got an array of bubbles. We can loop over them all and pop them or draw them. And it would be more convenient to use for-of notation for that. And getting close to sort of my last advice for the day, when things break in your sketch, and the more you go along with programming in P5, the more you will find that things do break. And you don't know why your screen looks the way it does, and it's not what you imagined it would look like. The first thing is not to panic. I do find sometimes I speak to students and they're like, well, I had this great idea and then I deleted it because it didn't work. I was like, well, why did you delete it, right? It was probably, maybe it was going to work. Maybe it was working, but just like some small thing was preventing you from seeing that it was working. But it's useful to be able to check the console, the JavaScript console. If we're using the web editor, there's a little console there. But if you're just in a regular web page in Firefox, you can do Control-Shift-K to get the web console out. There's the JavaScript console. And you can also inspect your web pages if you want, that's fun. Select different elements and do some web dev hacking. Yeah, well, Ali's got a very good point. For those folks who are new to computing and Git, you can, whenever you have a good idea, you should commit it and push it in your code. And if it doesn't work, that's fine. You can delete your text, change things, and commit it again. But if you ever lose an idea and you want to go back, you can look in your commits and see what your previous code was. So it's something that if you wanted to do that for the first time, you might have to ask for help from one of your friends in the course or a tutor. It can be a bit tricky to navigate using Git to go back in history, but it's there. You can use it as a way of backing up old attempts. A very handy comment. So, further reading for today. If you are finding that your week 6 is very boring, which none of you may be finding that, week 6s are always difficult, you should and could go and have a look at all of the things we've done together and try them out. They can be good examples for you to start. You could pick some random P5 functions and have a look at them in your code, see if you can work out what they do. You could read the book, which is the textbook for the course. Now we know all the code concepts. This book will make more sense because it's the work in there sort of assumes that you kind of are ready to begin with what a loop is and what an if then statement is, etc. So there's lots of cool examples in here if you go further in the book. Variables, responses, set thickness on the fly, these kind of stuff. It's on this O'Reilly platform, which lets you see nice pictures of what all of your images are. Smooth lines with easing. This looks cool. You want to try out this code? Let's try it. I'll move it into I'm going to save this one. Week 6, very bad art demo. Save that one, and I'm going to add it to save. add to collection so you guys can find it later if you really want to see my bad art. Let's have a look at some cool example from the textbook. Ooh, oh, this is nice. I actually want it to have, adjust this a bit. It's window width. It was sort of obviously set up in a certain way for the book. Window height. Where's my background drawing? What's gone wrong with my code here? Oh, I've done that before create canvas. Whoops. Wrong again, Charles. So this line, this is nice. Wow, what a cool idea. So as you move your mouse faster, the line gets thicker. And it doesn't like, it chases your mouse pointer, but it's not instant, is it? So it becomes very smooth. I wonder how this works. We could read the book, or we could just reverse engineer it a bit right now. So every loop of the draw, we get our target X, so that's where my mouse X is currently up to. And we're going to add X, I guess this value X is going to be my current location that I'm drawing. So I've working out the distance between target X and X and multiplying by an easing factor. So I'm going to just slow down my movement so it eases into each of those points that I move my mouse to. If I made that easing factor higher, it will probably chase my mouse more quickly, and it looks gross, doesn't it? If I make it 1, it's just going to chase my mouse around the screen directly. There we go. Very responsive, but also doesn't look very nice. If I make it 0.01, it'll be very slow. And what is actually being drawn here? Well, it's a line between two values, xy and px, py. You might have done something like this in the early labs when I suggested making some nice smooth drawing sketches, but this is a cool idea. Anyway, this is why you look at the textbook, because you get inspiration about cool ideas. You could also read the MDN JavaScript docs to brush up on some JavaScript techniques. That's something I recommend, particularly if you feel like your level with JavaScript, you know what you basically know what's going on in the labs, but there's some things you just don't understand yet. And you probably don't understand them because I haven't explained everything in the greatest detail. I've explained it just enough to get going. And then if you want to get below that surface level of understanding, you go back to the tutorials again and read them again. I still do this with programming languages that I know. I go back through references and have a look and learn something new about it, because there's usually a lot of detail to programming languages that you will find you want to catch up with over time. I've now reached the end of this lecture, so I'm going to stick around for a second and see if there's any other last minute questions. Otherwise, I will be getting assignment marks back to you very soon. I will be getting talking to the tutors about some samples from assignment 2 to talk about, and I hope to get some fantastic questions on the forum this week about how assignment 2 is going. I know folks tend to prioritize their time with other bits of work, but once you start to work on the assignment, please do post questions, post ideas, talk about it. And the more you do that, really, the more everyone benefits, but hopefully you get back more. The more you share, the more you get back from our forums. Ali says that they're not prioritized. They're, no way, I love this course. So you're definitely prioritizing it. Thank you so much for those who are prioritizing it, making it their first priority. That's great. I will catch everyone on Thursday. See you then.